The Supernatural Research Institute was a special place dedicated to the study of spirit energy. It gathered awakened individuals from across the country, along with professors who taught essential skills. The institute's goals were to study spirit energy and train supernatural beings. In Gao Yuan's eyes, Xiao Ling was an exceptionally rare find. Xiao Ling looked down, taken aback by the massive structure below. Rather than calling this a structure, calling it an academy sounded far more fitting. Gao Yuan led Xiao Ling into a packed room, full of newly awakened individuals summoned here from across the country. They were a diverse bunch, green-haired, red-haired, and some that stood out even more. Among these distinctive figures was a woman with striking green eyes and a beauty mark, the type to really set the town on fire. Miss City Girl shot a sidelong glance at Xiao Ling, standing next to Gao Yuan, thinking, "Who's this bumpkin with a backwater look? I can smell the mud from here." She herself looked stunning, a full 10 out of 10, as long as she kept her mouth shut. The director appeared above and began lecturing. He said that as more mutated creatures appeared, they threatened human survival, and if humans couldn't evolve, they would eventually be eliminated by the world. This was an undeniable truth. Even if mutations weren't happening, people who didn't strive to grow would soon be cast aside by society. After calmly analyzing the state of the world, he suddenly shouted, spurring the young crowd on by proclaiming that they would drive the wheel of the new age. But first, they needed to grow stronger to carry the weight of this new era. The Supernatural Research Institute was created for exactly this purpose. The old man roared, "Let's start the new era," and was met with enthusiastic cheers from the crowd. Who wouldn't want to be a superhero and save the world? Thanking everyone for joining, he announced the first round of testing. The newcomers would place their hands on a glowing stone etched with ancient symbols to test their spirit power under the supervision of the man with spiked hair. The first person kicked things off fairly well, showing a spirit power of 1200, a mid-level result. After that came a string of low-power levels, ranging from 20 to 270. All those filled with dreams of saving the world found themselves exposed as mere mortals in the power test, collapsing to the floor in bitter disappointment. Finally, someone showed a decent 900 spirit power mid-level, but right after was someone with only 5 spirit power, the first to rank as super low. The man with spiked hair was losing it. These levels were much lower than previous classes. In all his teaching years, this might be the weakest intake he'd seen. Next up was City Girl herself, Yan Lengling. She placed her hand on the stone with complete composure, and her spirit power turned the light between the stones to yellow. No wonder she looked down on everyone else. She had the talent to back it up. The spiked hair man's eyes widened. City Girl's spirit power reached 2000, placing her at a high level, the first to achieve this rank. She tossed her hair as she walked away, already attracting a crowd of admirers after a single test. And who could blame them? Her spirit power exceeded that of many veterans, and with that beautiful face, still silent, she was an effortless 10. Lengling cursed inwardly, fully scornful of the others. "Of course, I scored high. What's so surprising about that? I'm a city girl, not like those simpletons." Xiao Ling was the last to take the test. As she brushed past City Girl, she caught her attention. The spiky-haired man grumbled to himself, thinking, "One person with 2000 spirit power every 2 years is already excellent. We'll have to nurture her well. She's basically the hope of the nation. No worries if the next test results are weak." Xiao Ling stepped up for her test, as the old man and Gao Yuan observed closely from above. The director asked Gao Yuan if Xiao Ling was stronger than Miss City Girl. "I don't know," he answered, "but you should never underestimate the fire elemental power." Gao Yuan kept hyping Xiao Ling up, making the old man pay even more attention to her. His curiosity piqued. Xiao Ling placed her hand on the stone. Boom! Spirit power exploded, turning the entire stone slab into a blazing yellow pillar of light. Not pale yellow, but a brilliant, dazzling gold that lit up the whole area. The examiner's jaw dropped. He shouted, 5,000! Super high level! My God! The two observers above were equally stunned. Gao Yuan, though aware of her potential, hadn't expected it to be this immense, and it didn't stop there. Everyone in the room watched, astonished, as her power kept rising, reaching over 6,000 until it finally blew up the stone slab. The spiky-haired man, being closest, took the brunt of the blast and was sent flying. Those further back struggled just to keep standing. Xiao Ling, after causing such a stir, maintained an innocent look to say sorry. "I broke it. Thank goodness she wasn't the first to be tested, or the proctor wouldn't have been able to measure anyone else. The examiner, after witnessing the spirit power explosion, was absolutely thrilled, certain this would be the best class yet. From above, the director's face went pale, smiling stiffly at the thought of the broken spirit meter, which would cost a small fortune to repair. He was probably a bit traumatized. Miss City Girl, Langling, trembled all over, finally breaking her silence out of pure shock. But her elegance took a hit, as she couldn't help but mutter a line that still had a trace of rustic slang. The spiky-haired man cheerfully moved on to the second round, his grin making the candidates feel slightly nauseated. This round involved a tiered challenge. Those with spirit power over 100 would select a high, medium, or low gate depending on their ability, leading to different areas for superpower assessments. Whatever the test was, the guy at the door looked extremely intense. Xiaoling and Miss City Girl, both high level, were grouped together, along with a few side characters. Waiting to greet them behind the door was Gao Yuan, standing alone, casually adjusting his sleeves. Miss City Girl smirked. "What's this supposed to mean? Is he planning to take us all on by himself?" She said as much out loud, which was spot on. The task was simply to touch Gao Yuan by any means necessary. If they managed to do that, they'd pass. Meanwhile, far from the city, back in the ravine, a certain mutated willow tree was basking in the sun. Ah, what lovely weather today. Let's take a deep breath. Wait, what's that smell? Oh no? It's awful. The honey badger had done something unspeakable nearby, practically blinding him. Someone get me a whip so I can punish it. But before he could act, Ziyu had already slapped the honey badger on the rear. To be fair, the honey badger was probably trying to fertilize the tree, but unfortunately, this tree didn't need that kind of help. The forest remained as indifferent as ever, but things weren't looking as calm over in Xiaoling's test. The group was sprawled on the ground around Gao Yuan, not kneeling in admiration, but in sheer agony, unable to stand. Gao Yuan grinned, taunting the newcomers. At this level, they're not going to make it. When a master comes down to play with the rookies, there's no need to hold back. Only Miss City Girl, Langling, and the rustic Xiaoling were still standing, though barely able to catch their breath. If things kept up like this, they'd soon be out. I'm not sure about Miss City Girl, but if Xiaoqing couldn't guide Xiaoling through, she'd definitely face a cut on her favorite essence. Around Gao Yuan, everyone was taking their turn at tasting dirt, except for the two high-level girls. One, Miss City Girl, detested dirt, and the other, the village girl, was all too familiar with it. Both wobbled unsteadily in front of Gao Yuan. He glanced at his watch, frowning. Only 10 minutes left. If these two don't try harder, they'll be stuck at the beginner's gate. Come on, claim me already. Miss City Girl, Langling, felt an itch at Gao Yuan's words, but could only let out a huff in frustration. Meanwhile, Xiaoling was panting heavily before catching her breath and yelling that she couldn't afford to be disqualified, not with life essence waiting for her. Spirit energy flared up around her, transforming into a vaporous force as her hair stood up like a Super Saiyan. Naturally, Miss City Girl couldn't do that. She could only gape in awe. What fire? Gao Yuan stood calmly, even smiling, as he waited for her attack. He felt proud, seeing the power of the person he had brought back from the mountains on full display. It proved his eye for talent. Xiaoling used flames to boost her speed, which Gao Yuan could see through. He wanted to gauge how well she controlled her powers. "You won't catch me that easily," she yelled. Using the ground to push off, she leaped at a speed that blurred her form, causing Gao Yuan a mild headache and leaving Miss City Girl practically cross-eyed. This is not a level a beginner should have, she thought, mentally noting the resilience of this mountain girl. Xiaoling executed a display far beyond ordinary human ability, bouncing around Gao Yuan like a Pikachu. The examiners watching from the sidelines were speechless, just totally amazed. After circling Gao Yuan enough to leave him momentarily dazzled, Xiaoling launched a sudden strike from below his chin. He dodged just in time, but she followed with a series of precise blows. Her eyes burned with fury as she went all out in her assault. Although the task was merely to touch him, she seemed intent on taking his life. Who would dare let her get close? Gao Yuan leapt into the air to avoid her deadly moves, thinking he'd be safe there. But just as Xiaoling was about to reach him, out of nowhere, a kick slammed into her neck. It was Miss City Girl, Langling. She'd been biding her time in the background. Not only did she have a sharp tongue, but she fought dirty, waiting for the right moment to ambush Xiaoling and steal the victory. Gao Yuan was left speechless. The force of Langling's kick sent Xiaoling flying straight into the wall, where she landed face first. Langling casually patted Gao Yuan's shoulder, signaling that she'd completed the challenge. Gao Yuan's expression cold, as he didn't really care about who won this round. The examiners, shocked by Xiaoling's strength, were now just as taken aback by Lengling's underhandedness. Both were drenched in sweat. The second round concluded, and Gao Yuan quickly rushed over to Xiaoling, who sat dazed on the floor with blood trickling from her head. Despite this, she didn't utter a sound. Gao Yuan had to express concern for her. Unconcerned with her bleeding wound, Xiaoling's mind echoed with her boss's instructions. If someone tries to stop you, you know what to do. Xiaoling stayed silent as Gao Yuan fussed about getting her to the clinic first. The test is over. She silenced him with a single expressive, "Get out of here!" Her eyes, glowing with an animalistic fury, were filled with rage. Lengling approached, taunting, "So, 6,000 spirit power, and this is the best you can do? Lost already? Why don't you run back to your mountain?" The only answer Lengling received was Xiaoling's declaration, "I have to get rid of everything that gets in my way." Miss City Girl didn't quite catch the warning at first, so Xiaoling went straight to demonstrating. In a flash, she grabbed Lengling's head and slammed it into the ground. Her rage hit with the force of a bomb, sending dust and debris flying. But she wasn't done. She gripped Lengling's throat to shut her up, her face brimming with terrifying fury. Even with her throat clenched, Miss City Girl couldn't stop talking. "Let go, you backwoods brat. The test is over. Are you trying to kill me?" "Exactly. Who was it that fought dirty just now? Getting in my way?" snarled Xiaoling, turning into a wild beast. With one hand holding Lengling down, her other fist ignited, ready to smash her opponent's face. Lengling, realizing the seriousness of the situation, frantically apologized, begging Xiaoling to forgive her. "I was wrong. Don't. No chance." Ling's fist came down with lightning speed, matching her earlier attacks. If not for Gao Yuan's level speed in blocking it, Miss City Girl would have been out of commission for good. Gao Yuan shouted, "Stop! Stop! Both of you passed the test already. I was just kidding to boost morale, make you fight harder." Xiaoling looked at Gao Yuan with a dangerous expression, but a second later, upon realizing she'd passed, she broke into a smile as bright as sunshine, switching moods faster than an X. Now that she'd passed, there was no need to kill, and she left Lengling unconscious on the floor. Gao Yuan stood in stunned silence. A moment longer, and even he wouldn't have been able to stop Xiaoling. The rage of a woman, truly terrifying. The old man observing from above was struck speechless by Xiaoling's power. He stammered, Focus all resources on cultivating this female student." And so Xiaoqing, through Xiaoling, completed the entrance test. She flashed a victory sign to her boss, making Ziyu grin with pride. "My lost daughter," he thought. The two, well, a spirit and a tree, celebrated with a high five. After that day, Xiaoling's talent became known nationwide. Young and gifted, her power had already reached stage 8, and she became a top priority at the Supernatural Research Institute. Back in Xiaoqing's old village, the mountain had reluctantly let Xiaoling go for her safety, though they didn't like it, but they preferred survival. Time flew by, and the winter arrived. Every day, Ziyu continued to evolve his branches. The hatchet snake was gone. The humans had left, yet danger was not afraid of the cold. The scent of blood and slaughter still lingered in the air. This time, the hidden mutated beast was a huge creature with 2 long tusks, like a mammoth, and, notably, it had also reached rank 1, like Ziyu. In the northwest region, rocks covered with purple crystals lay scattered. Piled upon these rocks were the bodies of creatures, large and small, casualties of human spirit stone mining. Despite heavy human losses, the discovery of the ore was deemed worth the cost. The humans were surveying the mine, unaware of the piercing gaze fixed on them from the shadows. Behind them, a massive centipede adorned in silver with sequined pearls and thousands of glaring purple eyes appeared. In its snazzy attire, the humans looked ragged and ugly by comparison. The centipede had seen enough, and it decided to handle these eyesores near its precious mine. No images to show, but the screams were plenty loud. The question was, with humans possessing satellites capable of scanning spirit power, how had they been caught off guard by such a colossal centipede? Clearly, this centipede had some special trick for masking its spirit energy. On Ziyu's end, he had completed upgrading all the branches, and soon they would reach the peak of rank 1. Now, he only needed to upgrade 8 more roots, and he'd be done, finally moving up to rank 2. Once he reached rank 2, it would take a nuclear bomb to kill him. Otherwise, his chances of survival would be pretty high. However, there was still a significant issue here. Just like when he reached rank 1, the upgrading process would create a wave of spiritual energy. This wouldn't only attract other creatures, but would also reveal his presence to humans, which was extremely dangerous. Only humans know just how terrifying other humans can be. As Ziyu was pondering this, Xiaoqing suddenly reported some troubling news. At the Supernatural Research Institute, Gao Yuan, already in a fragile mental state, received a shock upon hearing that the entire squad sent to mine ore in the northwest had been wiped out. The spiritual energy from the ore spread out, attracting a lot of monsters. It wasn't as though they hadn't done their research beforehand. Initial scans showed the combined spiritual energy of the monsters only reached 4,000. Who could have expected a 12,000 spiritual energy centipede to show up? Gao Yuan immediately tensed up. After the squad was devoured, the extraordinary team was deployed to subdue the centipede. Amidst a campfire that was far larger than regulations allowed, the eerie shadow of the giant centipede appeared. This opponent for humanity was definitely not going to be an easy one. Xiaoqing reported enthusiastically, and the first thing that entered Ziyu's ears was humanity's discovery of spiritual energy ore. What would happen if humans possessed this spiritual ore? They'd create a host of weapons, spiritual imbued gear, or even potions to enhance spiritual energy, ultimately posing a greater threat to all mutated beings, specifically to Ziyu. Xiaoqing was now entering stage 9, thoroughly explaining to Ziyu about the spiritual stones. A natural spiritual energy ore had been discovered in the northwest, and everyone was fighting to claim it. The research institute wasn't going to just stand idly by either. Spiritual stones were deep purple rocks, crystallized from spiritual energy. Imagine sugar water as spiritual energy, and the crystallized sugar itself is the spiritual stone. In other words, spiritual stones contain a massive amount of spiritual energy, which can significantly strengthen whoever uses them. By harnessing the power from spiritual stones, humans could reach levels comparable to high-ranked mutated creatures. Just thinking about it made his head throb. He originally believed that upon reaching rank 3, he wouldn't need to take humans seriously, but suddenly, they discovered spiritual stones, which allowed them to swiftly upgrade and catch up with mutated creatures in no time. Ziyu grimaced. Humanity was hateful, changing the situation just like that. How were they expecting him to live? From the perspective of a mutated being, humans discovering spiritual ore was a calamity, but for humans, spiritual stones were a blessing, potentially saving them from extinction. Xiaoqing delivered the next shocking news. The spiritual ore was one thing, but within the mining area, there was a centipede king, something else entirely. This centipede was a rank 2, which could hit Ziyu like a bolt of lightning. Not only had the centipede king devoured the entire ore mining squad, but it had also taken out half of the extraordinary team dispatched to handle it. What on earth was going on? How did the centipede reach rank 2 so smoothly? Humans had satellites scanning for spiritual energy and should have eliminated it when it first appeared. Was it because the centipede had a talent for hiding its presence? Panicking, Ziyu asked Xiaoqing if humanity had managed to resist yet. Xiaoqing responded that the centipede had appeared too suddenly, and it wasn't weak. It posed a considerable threat across the entire continent. After hearing about the centipede, Ziyu grew silent, asking Xiaoqing if he could take on the centipede in a fight. "Of course not, boss," she replied. "You couldn't even carry its shoes. The Centipede King's battle power is over 120,000, while you only have 16,000. You're not even a fraction of its strength." Sighing, he thought, raising you on essence only for bad news and insults. Feeling deflated, he dismissed her with a wave. "Fine. Go home. Come back another day to torment my heart again." "Yes," she calmly responded. Xiaoqing returned to the Supernatural Research Institute under Xiaoling's guise. She sought out a grandmaster or professor who had his hair done in a strange way. But was it his hair? If that wasn't hair, this guy wasn't human. He didn't know why Xiaolin had come to his lab, but she demanded to be sent to the northwest region. He refused, saying she could see the centipede once it was captured, but should stay home for now. Xiaolin was taken aback. Captured? She questioned whether humans could even hurt the centipede. The Grandmaster remained completely calm, saying, "Do you think that silver centipede can terrorize us forever?" He reassured Xiaoling that her share of the ore was already prepared. Xiaoling probed further, asking why such a massive centipede went undetected. The Grandmaster thought that, firstly, the centipede could conceal itself. For the second reason, he became even more cryptic, suggesting it might have something to do with the spiritual ore itself. His tone strongly hinted at the second possibility, which only made Xiaoling more uneasy. The head falcon let out a loud chirp, signaling to Ziyu that its crew had brought back the queen ant. Maybe they intended to share the catch with him as a treat. Ziyu broke into a cold sweat. Good grief, these 8 silly birds. Still, it wasn't too bad. Thanks to the queen ant, there was now a whole colony of ants to gain evolution points from, so upgrading wouldn't be an issue. Ziyu elegantly dealt with the ant swarm, with the red fox lending a paw. Now in its 8th stage, it was growing colder and more serious, a far cry from its adorable younger days. His evolution points had reached 882, enough to upgrade all remaining 8 roots, though Ziyu didn't seem very enthusiastic. This upgrade would mean a pain level comparable to giving birth to 8 babies at once, but for a future that could rival the centipede, he had to grow stronger. Gathering all his courage, he braced himself for evolution. First, the roots broke through the surface, then flailed wildly, and finally shed their skin, transforming into jet-black roots. The roots continued writhing post-molting, inflicting immense pain on Ziyu. He gritted his teeth, determined to endure the pain, vowing to grow stronger, no matter the hardship. "I have to be patient," he said to himself. Initially, it was just excruciating pain, but due to the massive strain of upgrading 8 roots at once, his face even cracked open. Evolution was far from gentle. Meanwhile, in another part of the same forest, a long trail of snow was painted with drops of fresh blood. At the end of this trail lay a honey badger flattened against the cold ground, even crying. What could make this badass break into tears? At the beginning, Honey Badger had been fishing on an icy river, braving the freezing water to drag up a fat fish. He was delighted, ready to enjoy his meal, when he noticed a skinny little squirrel standing in front of its burrow, staring at him. Just one look, and suddenly the lone squirrel had morphed into an entire lineage of squirrels. The whole family, from the oldest to the youngest, stared at Honey Badger's fish, at their stomachs growling loudly, as if they would like to show how starving they are. Not one to ignore the plea for food, Honey Badger, being a creature of love, naturally shared his meal. Half for him, half for the whole squirrel family. After finishing the meal, the representative of the squirrel family presented Honey Badger with a large chestnut, and both sides cheerfully waved each other goodbye. Honey Badger was quite fond of the chestnut. It reminded him of the time he traded dried beef for a peach with Xiao Ling. The peace didn't last long before chaos struck. A loud explosion erupted behind Honey Badger, blasting snow everywhere and knocking the chestnut right out of his hand. As he lay on the ground, he turned his head to see who had ambushed him, only to be greeted by an eye as big as a car tire, staring at him with an unfriendly glare. The eye's owner was a mutated giant tortoise, larger than a container truck. Looking up at it made Honey Badger feel like his neck would break. The sheer size and presence of the giant tortoise nearly scared his soul right out of his body. Tears welled up as he stammered, terrified. Looking closer, he noticed a pool of blood beneath the monster's feet. It was none other than the blood of the little squirrel family he had just shared his meal with. Although Honey Badger was terrified, he was even angrier at this beast for killing his friends. Heartbroken, tears streaming down his face, he opened his mouth and charged at the massive creature, declaring battle. True courage, he wasn't afraid of anything usually, and would take on anyone. But now, even though he was afraid, his anger drove him forward without hesitation. The Wind Wolf, patrolling the area, quickly spotted the blood trails on the white snow. They found Honey Badger, barely clinging to life, slowly being buried in the snow. Even as he lay paralyzed on the cold ground, he was still grinding his teeth, drool dripping continuously. Survival didn't feel like luck to him. He wouldn't be satisfied until he had chewed that monster to pieces. They brought Honey Badger back to Ziyu, who fell silent at the sight. It seemed that Honey Badger's opponent today wasn't a simple one. Ziyu felt it was lucky Honey Badger had survived at all. He carefully applied a drop of life essence to Honey Badger, who went from being slack-jawed to slack-jawed, but with open eyes. Despite receiving a pure drop of life essence, he hadn't fully recovered yet, and would need to soak in the lake a bit more to regain his strength. Since his comrade was attacked, Ziyu, of course, wouldn't let it go just because Honey Badger was lucky enough to escape. He ordered Wind Wolf to hunt down the attacker, with Red Fox joining the mission. This time, they had to find and deal with that scoundrel. Anyone who could lay Honey Badger low and hide perfectly in the fog wasn't weak by any means. They had to track that creature down before it grew beyond control. "I'm coming along too," chimed in Xiao Qing, who had snuck up like a ghost. Her sudden appearance startled Ziyu, who was already on edge. Right, she was actually a ghost. She brought shocking news this time. Spiritual stones had the power to conceal traces of spiritual energy. That explained how such a massive centipede could evade human detection. Xiao Qing suggested that Ziyu wait a bit longer. Soon, she would acquire a spiritual stone herself. She hinted at bringing it back for him, but he cut her off before she could finish. He had no intention of using the resources humans provided her. It simply wouldn't be enough. When Ziyu broke through to rank 3, a mere 1 or 2 spiritual stones wouldn't hold him back. Xiao Qing hadn't thought it through. When he reached rank 3, his aura would undoubtedly shake heaven and earth. There'd be no hiding it. Ziyu reassured her, saying they could slowly search for the spiritual ore. His mutated species was most sensitive to spiritual energy. He could even locate the underground river of spiritual energy, let alone what? Ziyu suddenly grew tense, a realization dawning on him that made him shout aloud. Only now did it hit him. Where did that underground spiritual river come from, carrying such a potent flow of energy? Drenched in sweat, he wondered, could the river's source be the spiritual ore mine? Things were getting more complicated. The attacker of Honey Badger likely used a spiritual stone to remain hidden. If so, this creature's power could far exceed that of the snake they faced before. Gathering his followers, Ziyu announced a change in plans. Revenge was off the table. Seeking revenge now could very well turn into seeking death. After hearing Xiao Qing's theory that the attacker might be trying to take over the spiritual ore, Ziyu thought it was possible, but he wasn't fully convinced. Now he divided his followers into 3 groups. Windwolf and Red Fox were to go to the scene and use their sense of smell to track the enemy. The flyers would scout from the sky, leaving nothing unchecked. Meanwhile, he dug a hole for Xiao Qing to go straight underground, following the spiritual river to find the river's source. This mission was purely for reconnaissance. They were to report back if anything happened and absolutely not engage in battle recklessly. With orders given, they all set out, some on land, some in the sky, and others down into the deep cave, following these 3 paths. Ziyu could only stand in one place and hope everything would go according to plan. Xiao Qing descended through the hole, overwhelmed by the network of roots Ziyu had already embedded underground. She followed the water's flow upstream. Above ground, Red Fox and his crew had located a large fissure by tracking the scent. The birds arrived just in time, and they all gathered at this strange spot, which was clearly the area they needed to find. Xiao Qing finally reached the end of the spiritual river, discovering the ore lode. Spiritual stones covered the entire area. It was close enough to Ziyu's territory that finding it so soon was no surprise. The creature dwelling in this mineral cavern seemed to have noticed an intruder, letting out a booming roar as a warning to trespassers to stay away. The sheer force of its voice alone was terrifying. According to Xiao Qing, its pressure was even greater than Ziyu's. Spooked, she felt she had to see what it was. Deep in the cave, the giant tortoise was hidden inside its shell, its 2 glowing eyes fixed on a small flower in front of it, apparently guarding the bloom. Xiao Qing hid behind a rock pillar and recognized the beast. It was an African tortoise, the same one that had injured Honey Badger. The giant tortoise's power was formidable. Thankfully, they had discovered it early. If it were left alone to grow stronger, the consequences would be unpredictable. Besides the massive tortoise, there was a tiny red flower sprouting from the spiritual stone. Its full name was the blood herb, a semi-living formation of the mineral ore, and to a rock tortoise, it was an invaluable treasure. One didn't need to be a tortoise to know that the flower provided immense power. If Ziyu consumed it, it would surely give him a boost like an energy pill. If the blood herb were useless, the giant tortoise wouldn't be guarding it so fiercely. As she was thinking this, a giant mouth lunged toward her, biting straight through the rock pillar she was hiding behind. Both the blood herb and Xiao Qing were flung aside. Shocked beyond measure, she wondered how this tortoise could see a ghost. Could it be because it had already reached rank 1? Above ground, Ziyu stood among his massive network of roots. He sensed the events unfolding below and sighed, realizing that, despite his careful instructions, things had gone awry. Xiao Qing had ended up provoking the beast down there. But wait, where was Honey Badger? Wasn't he supposed to be soaking in the lake to heal? Meanwhile, underground, Xiao Qing somehow managed to snatch the blood herb from the giant tortoise, sending it into a furious rage. It roared so loudly it hurt her ears. Xiao Qing then used her spiritual power to amplify her mental strength, lifting rocks and dirt to hurl at the tortoise. But the difference in their strength was immense. The giant tortoise stomped down with one powerful step, and all the surrounding rocks and dirt shattered, causing a massive destruction radius. The loud commotion drew Windwolf and Little Red, who were making their way through the entrance on the surface, down into the cavern. On the thick snow, a small explosion appeared, quickly followed by a larger one. The giant tortoise burst from underground, chasing after Xiaoqing, who was holding the blood herb and deliberately running, leading the tortoise right to her master. The tortoise, moving like a ninja, executed Earth Strengthen, constructing a massive earthen fortress stretching thousands of meters long and towering even higher, trapping Xiaoqing within. Physical tricks were useless against her, as she could phase right through the walls of earth that the giant tortoise built. However, the blood herb couldn't pass through and got stuck inside. It became clear that the tortoise wasn't using Earth Strengthen to capture Xiaoqing. Its target was solely the blood herb. The distance to Ziyu was still far, and if she kept running, they'd lose their chance. While Xiaoqing was trying to figure this out, something flew toward her at high speed from behind. This object smashed through the earthen wall, surprising the giant tortoise. Who was crazy enough to barge into its fortress? It squinted, and there it was, Honey Badger, the mad one. Honey Badger leapt high, clawing at the tortoise's face. It wasn't particularly painful, but it was certainly annoying. Using the hole that Honey Badger had created, Xiaoqing peered inside. Oh my god. Honey Badger was using his iron head strike, ramming right into the wall and making himself bleed a bit. Who knows if he hit a nerve, but he seemed to go berserk, fearlessly standing up to the giant tortoise. Goodness, Honey Badger wasn't even as big as one of the tortoise's claws. Outside, Xiaoqing screamed, calling for Honey Badger to turn back. He was just in beginner stage 6. There was no way he could take on a rank 1 beast. She yelled until her throat hurt, but the badger didn't hear a word. His mind was filled with one thought: revenge. Honey Badger charged forward, and the giant tortoise used its second earth technique, stomping down to create countless sharp stakes from the ground, a single touch of which would be fatal. But Honey Badger wasn't going to let any of them touch him. Dodging every spike with quick zigzag maneuvers, he charged at the tortoise's face. He struck the tortoise's neck with all his strength, but its skin was too thick, and his claws shattered on impact. When clawing didn't work, he went for a bite, clamping his teeth down on the tortoise. It worked. Blood started spraying, though no one knew whose blood it was. The giant tortoise glared at Honey Badger with a chilling gaze. It flung him off, sending his teeth flying as well. He'd need false teeth to chew dried beef from now on. Despite being a tortoise, it wasn't slow. It quickly stomped a foot down on Honey Badger's face with immense force, sending him flying hundreds of meters away, likely to his death. Xiaoqing, who had been watching with intensity, let out a sharp cry. No! Honey Badger lay sprawled on a fallen tree, with the giant tortoise still looming over him. Xiaoqing shouted, "If you keep going like this, you're going to die." Who cared about dying? For Honey Badger, getting even was more important. With not a tooth left, blood dripping everywhere, he could only remember the happy scene of sharing a fish with the squirrel family, then the bloody sight of the tortoise's foot crushing them all. Honey Badger couldn't forgive. He charged again, determined to get justice for his friends, surprising even the giant tortoise with his spirit. Touching, sure, but in my opinion, this was a foolish, reckless act. Know your enemy and know yourself, right? Don't follow Honey Badger's example, folks. It's dangerous. Honey Badgers are known for their sturdy build, thick skin, prominent forehead, and large claws. They are carnivorous mammals that live in Africa, West Asia, and South Asia. As a family, they are fierce and hold grudges, the most combative, loudmouthed species in the animal kingdom, showing fear to none. Ordinary honey badgers are already intense, but a mutated one like Ziyu's honey badger was even fiercer. Honey Badger roared, and blue energy trails began to erupt around him. His fur stood on end, sparking with traces of electricity as its color slowly changed before Xiaoqing's eyes. His body released streams of electric currents, large and small, making him look unstoppable despite the blood. Honey Badger activated his Thunderbolt, charging forward at lightning speed like a Super Saiyan, maneuvering sharply to make a 90-degree turn, aiming directly at the giant tortoise's lower jaw. Xiaoqing's mouth fell open in shock, hardly believing the impact was strong enough to jolt the tortoise's jaw upwards, showing the sheer force behind it. But as for defeating the tortoise with that move, only in his dreams. Honey Badger hung midair, completely unrepentant after causing such a ruckus. The giant tortoise, hot-tempered as ever, raised a limb to give him a smack, just to teach him a lesson about reckless driving. But if Honey Badger got hit, that'd be the end of him. Fortunately, Xiaoqing wasn't just for decoration. She quickly used her mental power to hurl rocks non-stop at the tortoise. Taking advantage of the distraction, Honey Badger leapt up and slashed at the tortoise's leg. Good thinking. Tortoise shells are heavy, and without steady footing, it would have trouble moving. Honey Badger paused to catch his breath, then zipped around the giant tortoise like a madman, making Xiaoqing's eyes strain to keep up. Even though honey badgers are known for their noisy, aggressive behavior and love to pick fights, they don't fight stupidly. He used his amazing speed and the tortoise's own bulky body against it, landing repeated strikes. Honey Badger's tenacity even made Xiaoqing start to believe he could win. Don't forget, though, he was only in stage 7, while the tortoise had already reached rank 1. Xiaoqing herself was in stage 9 and wouldn't dare face the tortoise directly, only managing to throw the occasional rock. Honey Badger leapt onto the giant tortoise's neck like a flea, but this flea wasn't there to suck blood. It came with a mouthful of insults. "Die, you bastard!" he yelled, and also shot electric currents. The shock he sent was strange yet potent, like a blue flame that was somehow also lightning. The tortoise fell backward, its sheer weight making the ground cave in around them. Honey Badger grinned wide, practically laughing himself silly. Victory! Xiaoqing threw her hands up in celebration. Panting like a dog, Honey Badger took a quick, relieved look down, only to be swatted so hard he flew 1,000 meters away. His relentless attacks had managed to deal 3% damage, while the remaining 97% just made the tortoise seethe with rage. Honey Badger lay on the ground, coughing up blood, and Xiaoqing grew frantic, too distressed to think of a way to help him. Now the giant tortoise started its real counterattack, first stomping Honey Badger, making him cough up blood, and then charging at him. "Who said you could touch him?" Xiaoqing suddenly appeared, throwing stones at it in quick succession. The tortoise shot her a dirty look. It had tolerated her antics long enough. Opening its mouth, it unleashed 100 years' worth of halitosis directly at her, making Xiaoqing gag and scream from the foul stench. Honey Badger had never been lazy in battle. His entire life had been spent provoking strong opponents, which had hardened his resilience. He didn't fear the guys who barked, "Do you know who my father is?" Nor did he scare of monsters bigger than him, and death didn't scare him either. Honey Badger wasn't afraid of failure. He put everything he had into each fight. It didn't matter to him that the odds were against him. The only thing he cared about was that he had watched an entire family of squirrels die right before his eyes, and he hadn't even managed to take a bite out of the tortoise in return. Honey Badger was unwilling to accept it. He had to bite the tortoise with teeth he had left, or his pride would torment his heart with unbearable anguish. His small mind could think of no better solution than diving headfirst into battle, his whole body covered in blood, so powerless that he cried, yet still charging straight at the giant tortoise. It wasn't for love, but to protect his dignity, even if it meant dying. He was ready for that. Mouth wide open, he let out a huge roar, raising his tiny fist in preparation to strike. He looked pitiful and a little absurd, already resigning himself to death. Did he forget how many little ones were waiting for him back home? If Honey Badger were human, he'd be the type who's hard to like, but impossible to hate. Hard to like because of his impulsive nature. Impossible to hate because of his unwavering courage. The giant tortoise saw Honey Badger raise a fist and raised its own. The two were about to have a cheerful high five. Watching this, Xiaoqing felt the urge to bang her head against a wall, her face pale as she yelled at Honey Badger to dodge. But of course, he wouldn't dodge, nor did he want to. He was determined to finish his high five with the tortoise. Someone else, however, stole his high five spot. A massive black root slammed down on the giant tortoise's head with a resounding bang. So much for a friendly high five. Now the tortoise was rolling into its earthen wall, having so much fun it didn't want to stop, almost rolling clear out of the fortress. Honey Badger floated midair, completely baffled. Who stole his high five? It was none other than his handsome boss, Ziyu, who had stretched his roots through the hole Honey Badger had made. And not just one root, but many, each one huge, long, black, and covered in bristly hairs. Suddenly, the giant tortoise looked tiny compared to the looming black roots of the willow tree. Ziyu sent one root specifically to wrap around Honey Badger and pull him back. The action was so swift that Xiaoqing only now realized it was her boss's roots, reaching just in time. Any later, and he'd regret it for a willow's lifetime. The roots twisted and coiled, but all their tips pointed toward the giant tortoise. Ziyu couldn't physically come here, so he instructed Xiaoqing to channel his consciousness into the roots. She immediately complied, placing her hand on a root. Ziyu blinked, seeing everything clearly. If he'd brought out his precious core, then things were very serious, and the tortoise should prepare itself. The face was tense. Xiaoqing was tense. The snake-like root was tense, and the only one about to be crushed was the giant tortoise. The battle took a new turn, with the swarm of black roots replacing honey badger in the arena. The tortoise couldn't see the core nestled among the roots and had no idea how strong they were, especially since the willow itself wasn't physically present. All it knew was that it had just been painfully smacked on the head and wanted to get back at those roots. That was the plan at least, but it might not work out. With his consciousness present, Ziyu took the chance to examine the tortoise. As he suspected, it was a mutated creature with elemental power, hiding and training in the oar's presence. It could have lived in peace, yet it chose to stomp an entire squirrel family to death. Now it had a dent in its head for its trouble. Ziyu was focused on analyzing the tortoise when Honey Badger's faint voice distracted him. Honey Badger lay nestled in a root, shivering, his head in desperate need of some medication. Ziyu didn't have medicine, but he knew how to ease the little guy's heart, praising him for his bravery in holding out until now. He also guessed the tortoise must have seriously wronged Honey Badger to drive him into such a relentless fight. "Now you can rest," he said gently. "Leave the stage to the core." Honey Badger was fierce with the whole world, but soft with Ziyu alone. He curled up, hugging his head, and burst into tears, his demeanor as if he were throwing a tantrum. Showing his vulnerable side, he fully trusted in Ziyu. The giant tortoise, stunned for a while, finally shook off its daze and lunged at the swarm of roots. Xiaoqing warned that its defenses were incredibly high, and it was best not to go head-to-head with it. But it seemed Ziyu had selective hearing. "What? Poke through it? Sure thing." He maneuvered a root to snap one of the tortoise's horns. Xiaoqing and Honey Badger watched in utter shock, surprised by how crisply he handled it. Why hadn't they managed to make that kind of impact earlier? Ziyu had missed a direct hit to the tortoise's head earlier because Honey Badger was making things a bit awkward to hold. Just a moment ago, he'd been so gentle and encouraging, but now he was flinging Honey Badger aside like garbage, truly a deceptive willow tree. Thankfully, Honey Badger wasn't just tossed to the ground. Little Red swooped in, catching Honey Badger on her back and carrying him back, much to his confusion. Now missing one perfectly balanced horn, the giant tortoise roared in anger and immediately stomped down, summoning its earthquake technique. Spikes shot up in every direction, piercing, slashing, and aiming toward Ziyu. He didn't even flinch, sweeping his roots through the spikes like feathers. "Don't touch me unless I touch you first," he seemed to say, "or else I'll have you doing hardcore yoga." He wrapped the roots around the tortoise, lifted it from the ground. Being a creature of earth, separation from the ground rendered it nearly useless. Without a word, he went about dislocating its limbs in a full-body treatment, complete with massage, cupping, and acupuncture, charge all by blood. Ziyu's strikes were powerful as a storm. Since the tortoise was still breathing, he threw in another punch, this time adding a giant axe for good measure. "Power charm, snake fist," he yelled. The giant tortoise spun in the air, dizzy beyond belief, until Ziyu helped it stop by punching it straight into a small mountain. It was flung 200 meters, rolled another 400, and finally stopped, dead from sheer dizziness. Ziyu reclaimed 8,000 evolution points, suggesting that the war axe snake down in the hell might want to reflect on its worth if it was only priced at 90 points. Way too cheap. Honey Badger, seeing his vengeance fulfilled, pressed his lips together with satisfaction. The giant tortoise transferred its residency to the underworld, and its entire mineral cave now belonged to Ziyu. Delighted, he leapt around in joy. So many ore, all mine. The spiritual ore made him grin from ear to ear, and there was an extra perk too, the freshly plucked, aromatic blood herb. Like the saying goes, what's yours is mine, and what's mine is still mine. He decided to uproot the whole vein of minerals and take it all home. To store the massive trove of minerals, Ziyu dug a cave under the roots of the tree for the animals to get back. He created a vast underground complex where his pets could haul in the ore. Little Red and the Tempest Wolves were the most efficient workers, dragging massive loads back to the caves. With the minerals now in hand, Little Red and Xiaoqing could use the spiritual stones to rank up, while Ziyu took advantage of this time to excavate 10 more small caves, giving each of his pets a room of their own. Perfect. Everything was ready, and he could now freely focus on leveling up. His minions, paid in Ziyu's special essence, worked tirelessly. By midday, they had gathered a huge stash of spiritual stones. According to Xiaoqing, the mineral vein that the giant tortoise had monopolized was of medium size, larger than the centipede's claim, though. Ziyu wrapped his roots around the pile of spiritual stones, feeling a rush of pleasure that spread through his entire body. All his roots and branches stood tall, saturated with spiritual energy, a sign of the promising transformation ahead. In the biting cold of winter, normal birds would fly south to escape the chill, but the less ordinary ones, convinced of their own resilience, stayed behind, unaware that this was the biggest mistake of their lives. Flying carefree in the sky, they were suddenly snatched by the neck. If the flyers had no chance, the walkers fared even worse, scattering in a frenzy. Nearby, a massive root dug deep into the ground, and from the depths, 8 long, wriggling roots emerged, twisting and turning. If I lived in this forest, I'd rather take myself out than let those hairy roots drag me to my doom. The owner of these roots was a willow tree. After evolving, even its core had changed, with an ominous glint in its eyes, fuller, more aged branches. Ziyu held up a mirror, inspecting his new self. He concluded that the paint job definitely boosted his damage output, especially with the white color, which gave him a slightly fierce look. Though no big deal, anyone who dared body shame him would just get smacked silent. First, he opened his system to check his stats. His lifespan had increased to 500 years, with over 13,000 evolution points. Photosynthesis now generated 1 evolution point, and his tree-specific talents had become even more potent, with further upgrades possible. His branches, roots, and life essence hadn't changed much from before. Likewise, his fog and illusion abilities were still the same. However, a new skill had appeared: earth manipulation, acquired from the defeat of the giant tortoise. Ziyu realized he could absorb the attributes of other creatures, an astonishing discovery. Grinning, he felt the urge to test it out immediately, flexing a bit to summon countless spikes from the ground, just like the giant tortoise's technique. This kind of move could wreak havoc in a city, wiping it out in less than a day, and now he understood why humans feared high-ranked creatures so much. After finishing the display, the spikes gradually disappeared. The effect looked impressive, but the range wasn't all that great, only about 100 meters, not enough to threaten anyone seriously, just enough to poke at his pets at home. His roots had already extended over 1,000 meters, after all. He'd never been able to pull his main roots out and move freely before, so he hoped that manipulating the earth would let him roam around more. The inherent abilities would continue to grow in power as he leveled up, and with enough evolution points now, he could try to upgrade them. Inherent abilities were divided into 3 categories: enhanced regeneration, strength and regeneration consumption, and strength and regeneration capability. The enhanced regeneration seemed the most valuable, as it would be key to survival. With this, even if more than half of his trunk and main roots were destroyed, he could regenerate from the remaining roots. So, he decided upgrading enhanced regeneration was the smartest choice. The upgrade took effect immediately, causing spiritual energy to flow out and make flowers bloom as if spring had arrived. This regeneration capacity was incredible. Everything nearby benefited from it. He pulled up a root and chopped at it, only to watch as the cut area quickly bubbled and regrew at lightning speed. Remarkable. If he boosted his regeneration speed further, who knew what he could reach? The spiritual energy radiating from him attracted all his pets, who eagerly emerged from the ground. Xiaoqing buzzed around Ziyu, showering him with admiration before starting her assessment. At this level, he must be at 200,000, no, maybe 300,000 spiritual power, a far cry from the centipede's rank now. 2 chirping birds were bustling above the willow branches. When humans were fighting battles, digging burrows, and evolving in every conceivable way, these 2 birds were nowhere to be found. Now they finally returned, just the 2 of them. They squawked noisily, cheep, 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 which translated meant there was suspicious activity. They'd flown over 800 miles with almost broken wings to deliver this urgent news. Oh, so that's what happened. Poor things. Everything's already been taken care of. They should go back, yet the birds kept chirping, still on high alert. Then there was this cow, all fidgety, drooling everywhere. Was it after that flower? The rock flower, an earth element crystal, held properties far surpassing simple vitality essence. To Ziyu, it was like an extra chunk of fat after evolving, useless to him. If the cow wanted it, so be it. After absorbing the flower, the black cow immediately evolved. its body growing massive and sturdy, its coat changing color, reaching the 9th stage with new name, Mutant Bison. Hard to believe it leveled up so many times in one go. And wait, there's more. The bison, now evolved, could speak another language. Sacred Tree was the first thing it uttered. Ziyu was thrilled, lifting it up. No need for language classes, and it learned a new word all on its own. So once reaching level 9, it could open its mind, gaining awareness. Recalling that Red Fox was also at the peak of stage 8, a little nurturing would soon see it reach stage 9, unlocking awareness too. Their gang would only grow stronger. As for the golden monkey, it was still waiting for its moment. Who knows if it would one day master 72 transformative powers just like Wukong. Right now, it hadn't shown any special skills. Ziyu kept expanding his cave, ordering his pets to bring in more ores. Xiaoqing then returned to Xiaoling's body, going back to the Institute to play the role of a model human. With both her physical and mental powers at peak form, her body contained both Xiaoling's fire attribute and Xiaoqing's spiritual energy. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say she would soon be the strongest. The organization favored her, allowing her freedom to roam. Xiaoling's favorite destination was her mentor's research lab. Today, her mentor called her in to show off his latest creation, a being combining human and wolf genes. This was somewhat predictable, just like the discovery of the Spirit Stone. The honey badger, feeling melancholic today, lugged its bandaged head out for a bit of air. Seeing a little nut in his hand, it frowned. He sat still, staring off as the world around him shifted. A lone wanderer's life was bound to be lonely. Wait, lonely? It was dodging work, that's why. Ziyu grabbed it, smacking its bottom, and tossed it back into its hole to work, its sore rump leaving it feeling quite embarrassed. Back in the lab, the new life form, a blend of wolf and human, had yet to succeed, despite thousands of trials. Each attempt failed, as the human part couldn't resist the beastly instincts. Thousands of failures meant thousands of test subjects had died. Xiaoqing fell silent at the thought. They wouldn't stop, though. The next volunteer would soon step up, all willing participants in the name of humanity's future. For their sake, the experiment must succeed. Her mentor was becoming terrifying. If only he could solve the problem of cellular regeneration, if only he could capture a being with powerful regenerative abilities, humanity would usher in a new era of evolution. Wasn't the missing piece for this experiment someone like Ziyu? Xiaoqing's mind quickly leapt to that conclusion. Either Ziyu would be targeted, hunted down, or another creature would be caught, completing the experiment, and humanity's evolution would ultimately threaten Ziyu. At Bayou Gorge, shrouded in thick fog, figures were moving in. 4 men and 1 woman headed up the mountain, armed but clearly not soldiers. The guy with glasses, the most timid of the bunch, feared the fog might swallow them whole. The scar-faced guy named Su Hu reassured him, saying that was something from the past. Both were ordinary folks. Fog-swallowing people was a thing of the past. Now, with Qianqin with them, there was nothing to fear. And who was Qianqin? She was a stunning, captivating girl with purple hair, a super being blessed with a woman's intuition. It sounded a bit silly, but it made perfect sense. Never underestimate a woman's intuition. And she also had a surprisingly round and bulging, bouncy heart. Following her were 2 men, one big, one small, both super being. The big one, named Qingzhao, had enhanced physical strength, and the smaller one, named Lang Feng, had shadow powers. They were tasked with gathering spirit herbs, maybe slaying a few mutated beasts along the way. The 2 of them strolled leisurely, joking as they went, until Qianqin suddenly sensed something approaching. Through the mist, 2 green eyes emerged, seemingly quite large. The beast roared, lunging at them. Glasses screamed in terror, but it turned out to be just a mutated cat. It was swiftly punched in the gut, knocked out of action. The big guy tossed the cat's body aside. It was only a beginner stage 1 cat, not worth selling. Today, their main purpose was to scout this area. Though it was a yellow zone, the military had mostly declared it dangerous because of the thick, fear-inducing fog. If any powerful beasts were here, they'd have been sealed away long ago by the government, or so they thought. After a few more steps, Qianqin sensed another dangerous presence. Judging by her expression, whatever it was had to be scarier than that little cat. She shouted, "Stop! I have a bad feeling about this. Run, we can't stay here any longer." But it seemed they were already too late. This time, it was also a cat, only much larger. Before Qianqin could finish her warning, it lunged at the big, scar-faced guy. The group barely registered its existence before it chomped down on his head, blood splattering everywhere. The white tiger wasn't done yet. It had the upper hand, being a stage 7 mutated beast with razor-sharp claws and a roar that could make anyone want to wet their pants. Qingzhao yelled, "Damn it," and threw a punch at the tiger. Qianqin's face turned pale. Was he stupid? She'd told him to run. He was acting like some wannabe superhero. Before he could even land a punch, the tiger casually swiped at him, breaking several of his ribs. Glasses fired his gun in a panic, but it was useless. Just made the tiger itch a little. Annoyed, it turned and bit him clean in half. The smaller super being shouted at Qianqin to run. "We can't defeat this level 7 tiger. At least someone needs to escape to inform the military." But it was doubtful she'd make it, with the tiger already in her face. It swatted at the small guy, sending up a cloud of dust with its powerful blow. When the dust settled, the white tiger was grinning slyly, saying, "Your turn now, baby." This tiger was on the prowl, dealing with rivals left and right, even stepping on one poor guy's head on its way to its lady. Chang'an stood there, hollow-eyed, unable to say a word, resigning herself to death. The tiger opened its mouth wide, ready to take a big bite out of her, but suddenly massive roots grabbed it, stopping it in its tracks. Compared to the roots, the white tiger was no more than a toy cat, and compared to humans, well, they were like tiny bugs. The roots wrapped around the tiger and pulled it away. Qianqin, traumatized, lay on the ground, slowly fainting. The last thing she saw was the tiger struggling wildly in a mess of massive, unidentifiable branches before she closed her eyes and passed out. Today's scene was as beautiful as always, and the tiger wasn't dead yet. Strangely enough, it looked meek, like it was meeting a friend's parents for the first time. The roots had dragged it to a strange place, surrounded by fierce animals, especially this short one on the ground, staring up at it with an irritating smirk. Such a low-grade white tiger. Poor Kitty was being cornered by the gang, sitting there quietly, looking all pitiful. Ziyu pulled out a vial of vitality essence. After his evolution, it now had an extra feature. It could increase friendliness, or to put it more bluntly, intimacy. Let's see how it works on this white furball. The white tiger's cocky eyes suddenly softened, as if a ray of truth had shone through its heart. It rubbed against the tree, then licked the bald face while meow like a real cat. The new function of the essence was really something. This tiger could switch sides faster than an X. What would happen if he used it on a human? Conveniently, he had just saved 3. Qianqin let out a soft groan, slowly opening her eyes to a scene of a gang of mutated beasts grinning at her with twisted smiles. "Help me, heavens! Somebody help!" She looked over at the other two, still deep in sleep. Say something like, "Call me Oni-chan. Please don't break up with me." "Oh no, am I going to die here? There is actually a tree demon in this kind of place?" Ziyu extended a branch, shifting Qianqin from an upright position to horizontal, with a branch placed right behind her. She felt a strange sense of déjà vu from this scene, like she had seen it somewhere before. "No way," she yelled. "I won't let you." But he wasn't planning to do anything to make her scream, just dripping a drop of chemical. Suddenly, she babbled on about everything was destroyed. The world would be taken over by this great tree, how the oceans, lands, and all creatures would fall under its control, creating a tree demon empire. Her rambling sounded oddly delightful. "What's your power anyway? How can you scream so impressively, like you're hyping me up?" Ziyu asked. It's a woman's sixth sense and intuition," Qianqin replied, half thinking she was in a dream, realizing she was talking to a tree. "What, can this be considered an awakened ability?" Ziyu chuckled, covering his mouth. "Did your ex cheat on you often? Is that why you awaken this power so easily from first-hand experience?" Ziyu lowered Qianqin, telling her to stay and teach his pets a bit about human knowledge. Qianqin was annoyed, snapping back. "Do you think I'm your slave or something?" She seemed unaware that her life had been saved by him, acting like she owned the place right after escaping death. The human mentality of dominating all creatures had deeply rooted itself in her mind, to the point where she'd forgotten the basic courtesy of repaying kindness. So irritating. Lucky she was under a charm spell. Otherwise, he'd have a headache, and if the headache got too much, he'd just bury her to keep her quiet. In Qianqin's eyes, a tiny leaf appeared, glowing with a green light. Her body stiffened like a puppet, a beautiful doll with empty green eyes. Ziyu was pleased. "Heh, it's working. Just a moment ago, she was brimming with attitude, and now she's all obedient. Life essence really is the best. Time to test it out a bit." "Call me handsome," she complied. "Handsome." Then she added, "Oh, great roots." Though great roots wasn't exactly flattery, he'd accept it. But handsome? He had never in his life seen anyone with a round face, no eyebrows, and no hair get called handsome. The charm effect of the essence was truly impressive. she could say something so mindless with such ease. One more command to test its limits. Take off your clothes. Wait, was that really necessary? It was command to Chanchin's ear, and she started to sob. I don't want to. You're a pervert. She ended crying loudly that made a mere tree like him feel so bad. It seemed that not all of them listened to me. There is still some wouldn't work due to her retained self-awareness, like in Chanchin's case. Next, he dripped some of the essence onto the two men still lost in their dreams, hoping that someday humans might be able to teach the bison and the red fox human knowledge. Sure, there was Xiaoqing, but she was too busy. Teaching this kind of thing can be done by anyone, instead of bothering Xiaoqing. He'd let the people he'd just rescued handle it. Who knew? Maybe they'd prove useful in other ways too. First, he'd set up a place for them to stay. Well, a place that looked more like a bird's nest with windows than a house. Truly pitiful. In the deep forest, 3 nests appeared, built for human lodging. Once they were done, he tossed the people in, without bothering to ask if they needed any interior decor. The human nests were positioned a fair distance from the willow tree and the entrance to the underground, which was reasonable. Too close, and the honey badger might start gnawing on it for fun.